Do you want to stay more focused on the right goals in your life, or even just figure out what the right goals are for you? Do you want clarity? Do you want better work-life balance? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Success Through Failure.
Welcome to the Success Through Failure podcast, the show that reveals failure as your path to success. You'll listen to intriguing interviews with some of the most successful people on the planet and learn how their failures became a launchpad for success and how yours can too. Here's your host, former Division I All-American wrestler, former Division I head coach, speaker, and personal coach, Jim Harshaw.
Welcome to another episode of Success Through Failure. Today, I bring you David Allen. Before I bring on my guest, I need to share something important. For years, I struggled to feel confident around the type of people that I spend much of my time with. Successful people, millionaires, CEOs, and leaders. Part of it was mindset, but also part of it is how I looked. Look good, feel good, as the saying goes. And I didn't look good. I didn't have clothes that made me feel confident. So I started buying expensive shirts, but then I had to get them tailor fit to me and athletic build. Then I discovered a new shirt. It's not only designed by athletes for athletes, it's designed to fit an athlete's body type. And it's made of athletic material. It's like putting on your favorite workout shirt, but it's a business shirt. It's machine washable and wrinkle free, which is a total deal breaker for me. I hate high maintenance clothing. And it looks better than the expensive shirts that I used to buy, and it even costs less. Now I feel confident that I'm wearing good-looking, well-fitted clothing that's designed to fit me. You can try one on yourself, totally risk-free because it's free shipping for you, one of my listeners. Just visit their website, stateandliberty.com, and use the discount code SUCCESS. That's State and Liberty, S-T-A-T-E, stateandliberty.com, and use the discount code SUCCESS. Returns and exchanges are totally free within 30 days, so there's absolutely zero risk for you to try one on. Again, go to stateandliberty.com and use the discount code SUCCESS. David is widely recognized as the world's leading expert on personal and organizational productivity. His 30 years of research and coaching to leaders of some of America's most prestigious corporations and institutions has earned him Forbes' recognition as one of the top 5 executive coaches in the United States. Time magazine called his flagship book, Getting Things Done, quote, the definitive business self-help book of the decade, end quote. Fast Company magazine called David, quote, one of the world's most influential thinkers, end quote, in the arena of personal productivity for his programs in writing on time and stress management, the power of aligned focus, and his groundbreaking methodologies in management and executive peak performance. David is the international best-selling author of 3 books, including, as I mentioned, the book that he's most well-known for, Getting Things Done, The Art of Stress-Free Productivity. As usual, for the listener, if you don't have time to listen to the entire episode, make sure you grab your copy of the action plan. I'm going to have all the tips, tactics, and resources that we talk about in today's show. David, welcome to the show.
Jim, delighted to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, let's start with this. Just tell us a little bit about your background, kind of where you grew up, where you went to school, et cetera, and how, kind of the 30,000-foot view of how you got from there to where you're at now.
That's a much longer story. Let me see how I can freeze dry this as best I can. Spent first 6 years in East Texas, in Palestine, moved to Shreveport, Louisiana, where I then went through to high school, took a little hiatus of a year as an exchange student in Switzerland. Amidst all that, went to a crazy little school in Florida in the 60s, no grades, design your own education, got a degree in intellectual or cultural history, got into graduate school, went to Berkeley in 1968 in American intellectual history, started to search for enlightenment, and academia didn't seem to be where I could find mine, so I dropped out and then had a lot of different professions, did a lot of exploration in terms of personal growth, self-development, et cetera, martial arts, got a black belt in karate, et cetera. But I had to make a living, so I wound up helping a lot of friends who had businesses, and they seemed to know what they wanted to do. I didn't. But I went in to help them, and turned out that I'd walk in and help them look at what they were doing. I'm a basically lazy guy, and I said, well, wait a minute, there's got to be an easier way we could do this. So now they call that process improvement. I was just saying, how can we make this easier? Make this easier. And I was a good number two guy. Then I discovered they actually pay people to do that. They called them something, so consultant. Now I R1, 1981, hung up my shingle, and then began to explore not only techniques for myself, because my life was getting more complex at that time, and I had a couple of mentors and some people who'd done some really cool work in organizational change, and taught me some pretty key techniques that worked for me to help me get more control, more focus, more space, more ability to think strategically about what I was doing. Turned around, started to use those techniques for my clients, worked exactly for them like it did for me. I went, wow, that's kind of cool. And so, long story short, I cobbled together a kind of a methodology about how do you surf on top of all this, too much to do, too many things coming at you. How do you keep your head clear? Because I'd fallen in love with clear space from the martial arts, from spiritual and meditation practices and so forth. Oh, come on. As a wrestler, you had to make sure your head was clear before you got on the mat.
Absolutely.
The mat, Jim.
Sure.
Come on, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, get it clear.
Yeah.
Clean up.
That's right.
Because you have to have the ability to focus. If four people jump you in a dark alley, you don't want to have 2,000 unprocessed emails still hanging in your psyche.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah. So clarity of focus, as well as finding some simple models that I could trust to use in my consulting practice, so I didn't have to make it up every time I showed up with somebody. So I began to cobble together this methodology that, fast forward, way become later, after I wrote the book called Getting Things Done, became known as GTD. But then in 1983, a guy came across me, head of human resources at Lockheed. He said, wow, David, what you're producing with your methodology is what we actually need in our culture. So he brought me in to design a pilot program for 1,000 of their executives and managers, and it hit a nerve. So I sort of found myself, who knew, in the corporate training and development world. So then I spent 15 years trying to figure out what I'd figured out and kind of maintaining a boutique consulting business, in terms of some training and still doing executive coaching. And then somebody said, God, you need to write the book. And by that point, as I say, it took me that long to figure out what I'd figured out, that it was bulletproof and nobody else seemed to have done it. So then I wrote the book, Getting Things Done. And then that sort of took me onto the global stage because it became a bestseller, not just in the US, but all over the world. So then trying to figure out, okay, how do I scale this? How do I manage that process? Is a whole lot of the last 15 years of my professional work.
And so we're going to dissect a lot of what you just said there, because that was, like you said, that was a 30,000 foot view. So there's a lot of stuff in there to talk about, David. You have been said to have had 35 careers before the age of 35. You talked about karate. I think you were a karate teacher, from what I've read, a magician, landscaper, travel agent, and all kinds of other things. Is that right?
Yep. Well, careers, give me a break. They were jobs.
Sure.
Some of them were one night stands. Frying hamburgers on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley one night because I was hungry. So I counted that.
Yeah, sure.
So if you add them all up, but it was kind of fun because I happened to be 35 when I counted them up, and there were 35 things I'd actually done for money in my life. So that I kind of became a little bit of an iconic thing that I just stuck out there. And
yeah. Well, you went through a period where you were probably unclear on what you were going to do, right? I imagine. I mean, if you're having this many sort of different things, right?
Jim, I agonized about that until I was in my mid 30s.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, because I had this spiritual focus and I wanted to make sure that me and God were okay and I was doing the right thing and that I was manifesting my destiny, what I was here to do. And so, I had the sort of good and bad news of being introduced to, wow, you need to figure out who you are as a human being on the planet and why you've incarnated and what you're here to do. And it's like, oh my God, but how do you figure that out? And it's got to be right. And so there was a whole lot of me avoiding doing anything simply because I wanted the right thing to do. So, but I had to pay the rent. So then I just wound up doing a lot of things, to pay the rent. Then,
so how'd you figure out
all of that, sort of discovering stuff as it emerged over these years about what was kind of unique as my signature.
Yeah. So that was just a discovery process. That was just putting one foot in front of the other and doing and taking action. I assume. I mean, tell me more about, because what you came to do became very I mean, laser focused. I mean, it's very, excuse me, it's very clear what you do and how you do it. I mean, it's a very clear methodology that you develop, but that evolved.
Well, come on, Jim. Jim, you teach what you need to learn the most. You must know that.
Yeah. Amen.
Right. So, the fact that I had no focus and didn't know what I wanted to do, and then started to uncover how to discover that and how to engage with that, not to have a final answer, but to understand what the process was and to get engaged in the process that was the right process about all that. I think that was my master key. Once I kind of landed on that, and I can speak much more consciously about it right now than I did then. I was still kind of following my nose, but in retrospect, I'd say that's actually what happened. But I was in my 30s before I had any clue.
Why do you think your message has resonated so powerfully with people around the world? I mean, you have a worldwide following. Why is the simple concept of getting things done, why is that so powerful?
It works.
Yeah. I mean,
what can I say? It works. It's like electricity. It's like anything else. Duh. People say, gee, David, how come your book is still a bestseller book after all these years? So I said, it works. And nobody else seems to have done this. Anybody who actually reads it and picks up the methodology. And, as you know, Jim, it's not some foreign language or some, high-tech thing you don't understand. It's simple behaviors. But if you do those simple behaviors the way that I lay them out in a consistent, way, then it produces transformative results in terms of your ability to be clear and be focused.
Yeah, it really does.
What can I say? I just had the grace, I guess, to have uncovered something that works universally. Though, come on, my book's only sold a couple of million copies, and there's 7 billion people on the planet. So it's like, come on, we got a lot of work to do. A lot of people still haven't figured this out.
Yeah, you're a relative nobody.
Recognized it. I know.
And I read your book years ago, and some of the things just really still stick with me. I would say the fundamental concept that has stuck with me is that just conceptually was your brain is not for holding things. It's for thinking, and you need to have a place to dump off the things that are on your mind so you can open your mind up to think creatively. And I'll tell you a quick story. I was the head wrestling coach at a small college wrestling program in Pennsylvania called Slippery Rock University. And it was a Division I wrestling program, Division II athletic department, but we wrestled with the big boys. And so it was a big job, and I was 26 years old. I was the youngest Division I coach in the country. And I would sleep at night with my dictaphone because I would wake up in the middle of the night and, my wife laying beside me, and I would things would be on my mind, and I would press the record button, and I'd whisper into the dictaphone. As soon as I unloaded it off my mind, I could fall back asleep. And so, I very much lived this concept of complete overwhelm, but having a place to dump it off so you can let go and let your mind be still again. Is that sort of the foundation of your program? I mean, that's the one thing that's really stuck with me.
Well, it's the initial foundation of it. I mean, you can record all that stuff, but if you don't listen back to it or decide what you're going to do about it, it'll still crawl back up into your head and wake you up at 3 a.m. So yes, but an absolutely critical first step. You got it. I mean, anybody just with a pen, if you just keep a pen and paper beside you, at night, you'll sleep better just for that reason. Because unfortunately, when you think of something that you might need, would, could, should, ought to, maybe decide, do something about, and you just leave it in your psyche, that place you leave it doesn't seem to have a sense of past or future, so it keeps spinning. You need cat food. You need cat food. By the way, Jim, you need cat food. By the way, you need Jim cat food. By the way, you told your kids you're gonna. By the way, Jim, you told your kids you're gonna. By the way, Jim, you told your kids you're gonna. So as soon as those things pop in more than once, that means that you haven't appropriately engaged with your commitment so that you could get it into the right place, so you could feel appropriate with what you've laid out inside your head. So yeah, it is the first very critical component and a big habit for most adults to change.
Right. I mean, you're using up bandwidth by having all of these things laying in your mind, and I remember, I don't know if you articulated this in an interview or something I read again years ago that stuck with me, was this sort of low level anxiety that's in your head because you have the 2000, as you referenced, the 2000 unread emails, or you've got to get cat food, or you told your kids that you would do this. You've got all these things, right, that are just kind of in your mind, but when you unload them, it kind of gives you more bandwidth to think more creatively.
Well, it's the counterintuitive part of what I've uncovered and what I teach and what this methodology is about. It's called, you need to pay appropriate attention to whatever has your attention. Otherwise, it will take more of your attention than it deserves. So you need to have integrity with dealing with the not so urgent, not so important stuff, but still stuff that has to get done. Otherwise, that will start to suck energy out of your sales to be able to really put the right focus on the things you need to put your right focus on.
Speaking of sales, like as in sailboat,
Yeah.
Can you share the story that I've heard you tell about yourself on a boat that lost power off of Santa Cruz Island? Could you share that with the listener?
Yeah. Well, you can go hear my first TED talk that I did, TEDx Claremont, where I used that as an example to show how when people, in a strange way, when you get into crisis, it's an interesting relaxation that happens. You actually move into your zone there because it forces you to actually do the behaviors that move you into your zone. Right? Assess current reality, decide desired outcome, focus on the next action, engage. All you have to do is do that, and then, interestingly enough, a lot of people get more in their zone in those kind of events, and sort of time disappeared. Catherine and I, our life was in danger. Our whole 42-foot boat was in danger, and we looked up and had a Zen moonscape that we just went, wow, is that really cool? But, the thing is that you don't have to wait for a crisis to get into that kind of flow or that kind of zone. You just need to do those behaviors that a crisis actually forces you to. So I don't particularly like crisis. That's not my favorite thing. But if what anybody does is start to focus on outcome, next action, you start to appropriately engage with the things that actually have your attention, that get you into much more of a flow state. So yeah, that was an experience that I had that I used as I'd say a metaphor, but it's actually an example of what happens when you do those behaviors and moves you into a flow state, moves you into your zone.
Yeah, you were very clear on the outcome that you wanted, and you were very clear. Live, right?
Don't drown.
Stay alive.
Save boat if possible.
Yeah, and the next action was very clear, right? And like most of the people that I work with and I talk to, they are vague on the outcome that they're looking for, and don't really know the next action, especially when it comes to the sort of the bigger stuff in life. They don't know the next action, or even just a project. Like they got 100 things they have to do, and they don't know which one the next one is that they need to do. So they get stalled.
Look, master key, getting things done. What does done mean? You get to mark something off as finished when what's true. And what does doing look like? If you were to move the needle on this toward done, where are you going to go, and what physical, visible activity are you going to engage in? And you're quite correct, Jim. Those two things are what most people avoid. Most people's to-do list, if they have one at all, have neither. They've got mom, they've got bank, they've got checkup, they've got cat, they've got karate for kids. So they've done the first step of maybe capturing something that got their attention, but they haven't moved to stage 2, which is then getting much more discreet about, what exactly does that mean to you? And what exactly are you committed to complete or finish about that? And what exactly do you need to do to move forward on it? And that's basically the algorithm I figured out. And it's one that I guess I'll spend the rest of my, I'm 72 now. I've probably got another 20 or 30 years on my tires. And I will be preaching this until I die, Jim, because for some reason, people just don't get this.
And you've been pretty, locked in on a fairly simple concept for a big part of your career here. And there's more to it than just going, just grab a notebook and write it down. I mean, that's sort of the surface level view of this, and there's a lot more to it. So for the listener who hasn't read any of your books, hasn't followed you, and is thinking, okay, so I just need to have a to-do list that doesn't just say cat. It says, take cat to the vet or call the vet to schedule an appointment. What's the next step? And what's let's say I have a big project, right? Start a business, let's say, for example. That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
How do I attack that? Because I tell you, there's a lot of people who want to start a business or lose 30 pounds or fix their relationship with their spouse, right? So there's these big ones out there, these big life ones, right? Run a marathon, these bucket list items, these things that we feel unwhole as a person because we've not only accomplished them, but not even tried or started because we don't know where to start. How do we use GTD to, I don't know, let's just take an example of start a business.
Well, outcome and action. Start a business, but what's your goal? You want to start a business? What kind of business? So you could take 2 years and write a movie about your ideal scene, about your ideal business you want to create. So don't, come on, you're not going to do that. But okay, start a business. What do you mean by start a business? And so get some sort of a target, some sort of a goal out there. It doesn't have to be that clear. It just need to be something. You say, okay, what would be my next step toward making that happen? Do I need to talk to my friend Fred, who started a business like that? Do I need to surf the web to see who's ever done business like this? Do I need to talk to my life partner to see if he or she wants to do this business too? What's next? Sometimes the easiest thing to do is just start on the what's next, because oftentimes the final result takes a good bit of your own self-awareness and development and moving toward it to really discover what's driving you. There may be a fire in your belly, but don't assume that the end result of resolving that fire is clear to you yet. So don't think you have to have a goal set and whatever. Just say, well, wait a minute. I think I want to sort of start to have something that kind of looks like that. So what's next? What's next to help you clarify what that is? It could very well be, and many times people in that state where they're still unclear, but they've got a kind of a nascent or a germ of an idea, the best thing for them to do is say, well, wait a minute, what would be next to get clearer about what it is I want?
Sure. Yeah.
And that is sometimes the best next action you can come up with.
Yeah. Make a phone call. Call the Small Business Development Center. Pick up the phone, call your Small Business Development Center. If it's losing 30 pounds, it's calling your friend who lost 30 pounds last year. It's one action, and one action leads to when you're done with that, you go, okay, now what's next? Well, a lot of times what's next shows up. It's clear because you've taken that action, you've called your friend, you've set up coffee, and they tell you what they did next. Now you're okay, I know exactly what's next.
Well, Jim, come on, if I can be bold enough to say your game, excuse me, guys, make a bad judgment. Make a wrong next action decision, but get the friggin' going. Get moving because you course correct. When they shot something to the moon, 99% of the time it was off course. They just had a course correction mechanism in there, and they had the desired result. So, mistakes are how you get there. That's how you course correct. If you're making mistakes constantly to ride a bicycle, so you can get where you're going. It's just, you just have some intention to have some sort of directionality about what you're doing, and you pay attention. Hey, that's not worked. Let me shift that. Let me shift that. Let me shift that. And most people want it perfect before they take any action at all. Yeah. And that's unfortunately the perfectionism. It's what our schools taught us. It's got to be good. Screwing up is bad. All that great message that you had in your TEDx is, I couldn't agree more. But you need to engage. And the additional thing to, go make a mistake, but you need to make a mistake given that you're going somewhere. So you need to make a mistake towards some sort of intentionality. So that's the sort of add-on component I would, or corollary I would do to what you're doing. Yeah, make as many mistakes as you can. Just make sure you've got some sort of directionality about that.
Yeah. So you're not talking about, so if you're trying to lose 30 pounds, you're not saying just take action. It's not like, okay, I'm going to go eat a chocolate cake, right? We're talking about just anything generally toward the direction of where you want to go. And it's interesting.
Sure.
I think it was the founder or the CEO of LinkedIn said something to the fact, I'm paraphrasing his quote, was if you're not embarrassed by your first, and he's talking about software, launching a business. He said, if you're not embarrassed by your first iteration, you waited too long.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the interesting things you just said was, mistakes are how you get there. Mistakes are how you get there. And I think everybody's afraid of making a mistake, so they stay with the status quo. So with this in mind, mistakes are how you get there. David, has there been a time when you've made a mistake, a failure along the way? Because we look at somebody like you. You've got a worldwide, massive following. You've worked with some of the biggest companies in America, probably in the world. And, were there mistakes and failures along the way that maybe set you back to the point where you're like, man, maybe I really don't know what I'm doing here, or maybe cause some kind of self-doubt that you've had to deal with along the way?
Oh, yeah. One comes to mind. As my book started to become sort of globally popular, my wife and I had to make a decision about, should I just keep this sort of a little boutique business and just do my own speaking stuff or whatever? Because we're not the best players that play. We don't particularly like managing people. I'm not a good CEO. I'm not a good, not my interest to do that. I'm more of an educator, a researcher, about this methodology and communicator about it. But the world kept knocking on the door, and we said, yeah. And so our small little team said, yeah, let's scale this. And so I had to try to figure out how to do it. I was trying to write my third book, making it all work. I was buried. I was overwhelmed. I said, God, the world is now, I need to try to scale this. So bottom line, I think I need a CEO. I need somebody to come in and take on this thing who's got a much more of a marketing, scalable, kind of focus about how do we take this and grow it in some larger scale. And so, I was sort of, I made a wrong call. So bottom line, it took me 3 years to find that out. Very painful. And had to unload that and try to figure out, okay, now what do I do? Because we couldn't really by that point, it was not viable really to scale back what we'd already invested in. So I said, okay, what do I do now? I made a big mistake about that. Somebody that didn't match the DNA of our culture. So licked my wounds. So there was a big one, but lots of learning, lots of stuff happened after that.
Sure. And for the listener, it's easy for David to sit here and kind of rehash a 3-year challenge in just 30 seconds or so. But there was some real struggle that went along with that, and pain, and probably financial loss, or at least setback, probably a lot of obstacles, probably some personal challenges maybe with this individual. It's easy to recap that in just a few seconds, but the pain, the struggle, the failure, the adversity, the obstacles that you're dealing with in your life, for the listener right now, those struggles are normal. That's a part of your process if you choose to keep moving forward. Now you can allow those to just say, to tell you, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable enough, I need to quit. Or you can use those, make a choice to use those as education. Okay, a CEO is not the right way to go. I'm going to go and do this a different way. I've tried the CEO route. I've tried it. It was on my mind for a long time. I decided, based on the information I had at the time, that was the right choice. I made a wrong choice. Now I know a better way to go. And so, David, there's a million distractions out there these days. This overwhelm that we all feel, email inbox and our smartphones always on, and social media, and just the busyness of life. I've got 4 kids, we're running them to soccer, we're running them to all different places, piano lessons, etc. Is this busyness new? I mean, wasn't there always that at some level? I can remember back when I was a kid, we didn't have any, there were obviously no smartphones, there was no internet. But my parents were always busy, right? There weren't enough hours in the day even back then. So I hear people talking about this sort of overwhelm that we have now, but I feel like that's just kind of human nature, and it's kind of been around for a long time. Is that right? Or am I off here?
A little off. I mean, if you were back in primitive society, you could have been into, wow, I could sew stick this many more dresses to serve our tribe. Here's a new way that I could potentially fish, that we could have more food for our people. So it has always been possible that you would stress yourself out with opportunity. It's just the stress of opportunity now is much more endemic to our society because, frankly, what your neighbors are doing with their kids. Are you missing out? Oh, my God. So FOMO, fear of missing out, is now a huge, huge issue out there. And that's why crisis would let you relax, because then you don't have all those choices. How many choices do you have with your 4 kids about what you could be doing with them and how much better you could be doing with them? And by the way, and who do you know who's doing cool things with their kids that are your kids' age? And oh my God, what am I missing out? Oh my God.
Right.
Right. So
yeah. You can't do it all. You cannot do everything that you see your friends doing on Facebook.
You cannot do it all. That's what's changed. How much it all is there out there available to you, how easily, right? All you have to do is get off this Skype with me, Jim, and go surf the web for 5 minutes and find out how many things you're not doing with your kids you ought to.
Sure.
Right?
And so is this what you talk about aligned focus? So whenever in my coaching program, I talk about having aligned goals that align. Like we work on first identifying your core values and then aligning those core values with your goals, because a lot of times people have goals that don't align with what's actually important to them. They align their goals with what's parked in their neighbor's driveway, or what the media tells them, or what society, or what they see on Facebook. That's how they're aligning their goals, instead of aligning them with what's important to them. Is this? I know you talk about aligned focus, because a lot of people that I talk to, a lot of people that I work with, focus is one of their biggest challenges. I mean, is this what you mean by aligned focus?
Sure. How much are you watching your kids play soccer as opposed to being on your iPhone while they're doing that?
Yeah.
It comes down to that simple and that profound in terms of the decisions. Some of the most dramatic testimonials I've gotten, and we get legions of them over the years, of people who've implemented my GTD methodology. And for a parent to say, wow, I was able to spend the whole soccer game watching my girl play soccer and not be on my iPhone. This changed my life.
That's a win. Yeah. Huge.
Right. Huge. And all it did was it made it clear that, okay, now because I don't have to be my chain yanked around by all that buy cat food. Oh, I got to email my staff person about this. And, oh, they didn't handle this. I got to follow up with this. If you haven't handled all of that, that's going to suck you away from all this stuff. So yeah, focusing on your values is cool, but you better handle all the stuff that's getting in the way of you actually demonstrating and executing on those values.
Sure.
And that's I think what sort of a lot of my message was about.
Yeah. Well, I want to share with the listener a quick story. I wrote a blog post about this a while back, but I was working one morning on my podcast, and I wake up 5:30 in the morning, and I'm getting some quiet time, focus time, working on this. And my 3-year-old daughter, she was 3 at the time, she's 4, and she came down the stairs, and I'm thinking, oh man, why'd she wake up so early? Why didn't she just crawl in bed with mom? Like, this is my quiet time. This is my focus time. I need to be working on my podcast because I got to get this thing prepared and out the door today so I can send it to my guy who posts it and does the rest of the work. And she came down, and my first thought was, I'm going to put her in front of the TV so I can get this thing done. And then my second thought was, wait a second, that's not aligned. That's not aligning with me and who I am and what's important to me. So I made the change. Instead of doing that, I just shut the lid on my computer. I went and I sat on the toy room floor, and we played Zingo, this game that she likes to play. And that was doing with it what is so much more important to me. I felt balanced. I was doing the right things. Now, with that said, maybe I need to work on the organizational process and methodology to make sure I can get my podcast done on time and I don't have to run into that. But you feel more balanced when you have this aligned focus that you're talking about. And
indeed.
So, David, we have all these productivity apps and tools and tactics out there these days. Why do we still feel this sense of overwhelming business? All the tools are out there. There's like a sauna, and I was just reading about a couple of different productivity apps a couple of days ago, and like there are all these great tools out there, but we turn on our phone and we have all these messages, and we check our Twitter and we check our text messages, and we forget why even we got on our phone. I mean, some of these, do you have any productivity apps that you use, or any tactics to help us make sure we're using our smartphones in a way that actually helps us with our aligned focus rather than hinders us?
Get rid of your new addiction to what's new, what's going to help me, how do I manage that, and focus on the methodology. Once you get the methodology that I coach, teach, preach, whatever, get this stuff out of your head, clarify it, have some place you can see the whole game in terms of what you need to do so that you can be present with whatever you're doing. See, Jim, getting things done is not so much about getting things done. It's more about being appropriately engaged with your cat, with your daughter, with your business, whatever. But those aren't free, so you can't just get present and ignore all of that stuff. You've got the way out is through. You have to get down into all that and figure out what's the algorithm I need to apply and the behaviors I need to apply to get cat food off my mind. Hey, how about you write it on a Post-it on the fridge that whoever next goes to the store that has cat food, they pick up the Post-it and they get it. Then it's off your mind. Then you could be mindful and focus on your attention and focus on your breathing. And then you could watch your kid, play Zynga with your daughter. Or
right.
You can do whatever you're doing. But when you're trying to do that by trying to ignore the rest of it, you're actually creating more pressure than you're relieving.
Yes. Yeah.
So strangely enough, it's a strange thing about that. So anyway, that's a whole lot of my message. And God, I think, Jim, I'm going to be preaching this for a long time because people just don't seem to really get this, that your head is a crappy office.
Well,
and that's the biggest problem.
Well, I would highly recommend people start by reading your flagship book there, Getting Things Done. It's a book that changed my life. Fundamentally, you for the listener, you will find things in that book that will stick with you forever. They won't leave you, and they will help you just like they have for me, even though it's been many years since I first read the book.
Well, there's a new edition, by the way.
Right, that's right. I saw that
a few years ago. So, and I kind of updated it, made it much more current, and also broadened the audience. I mean, I knew when I even wrote the first edition that it worked for the clergy, it worked for students, it worked for stay-at-home dads, it worked for nurses and attorneys and anybody. It was pretty much focused. The first edition was focused on the high potential professional, because they were the first people being bombarded with the explosion of email back in the late 90s.
Yeah. And
so they were the hungriest, for solutions, for in a fairly sophisticated professional world. So the first book was kind of focused on that. My revised edition kind of expanded that to, hey guys, this is a lifelong lifestyle, way to manage the flow of your life's work. And, so yeah, so that's what's really changed. It's not so much the methodology. That's still, that'll be good 200 years from now as it was 200 years ago for busy people to try to keep track of their life and stay on top of it. But what's different really, I think, is the audience and the breadth of that audience.
What action can the listener take based on what we've talked about here? My listeners like to get an action item, something they can do in the next 24 to 48 hours so they can really start moving toward their goals. Is there one thing or two things that you can recommend that they do right away following listening to this podcast?
Sure. Well, number one, sleazy self-promotion. Go buy Getting Things Done if you don't have it yet. It's a manual for the rest of your life. Trust me, as Jim, pronounced right then. Okay, so if you want real behaviors to do that are in the book that would tell you what to do, the first thing is get a pen and favorite paper and take an hour and unload your head. Every single thing that has your attention. Buy cat food. Get a new cell phone. Get a life. I need to research hiring a new VP of marketing. I need to, God knows what, it's amazing how many people actually have inside their head they haven't really acknowledged in terms of things they've put their attention on. So unload all that and just do a major data dump about that. We call it a mind sweep. And then just take the top 10 or 15 things, the first 10 or 15 things, or the things that most have your attention, and decide what's the very next action you need to take about them. I will guarantee anybody listening to this has not done anything close to that yet.
Yep.
So if you just did that, you will start to experience what it's like to build the external brain and to relieve the pressure on your internal psyche by shifting how you manage all of those commitments.
Outside of your books, do you have a favorite book that you could share? And by the way, for the listener, I will have links to all of David's books in the action plan. So just go to jimharshawjr.com/action. I'll have links to all of David's books there. But is there another book that has been really influential to you that you could recommend?
Oh God, a whole bunch. I don't read a lot. I pick one or two things that I just sort of intuitively think are at the right time, at the right place. For the more high-tech oriented people, I highly recommend, if you've not read Michael Kelly's book, The Inevitable, I highly recommend that. The 12 trends that you cannot stop right now in the world that are from he was a founding editor of Wired magazine, and he takes 20 years of his experience and then frames that call, guys, we are at a precipice of a change in the world that would smoke the Industrial Revolution. It's much more to come. Fascinating book.
Excellent. So, I don't think we've had that recommended on the show yet, so that's great. I'll have that in the action plan as well.
Yay.
David, take a minute to just kind of promote yourself. Where can we find you, follow you, social media, website, elsewhere? How can we find you and follow you, and what do you got going on right now?
Yeah, well, we've now partnered with some major, very successful and wonderful partners around the world to distribute our training programs that are done publicly. They're done in-house in corporations around this methodology that I came up with. So if you go to our website and see our global partners, we have Vital Smarts in the U.S. that is now doing all of our training in U.S. and Canada. Great folks. So you'll see a connection to there if you're interested in that. If you're anywhere outside the U.S., then you can see our global partners. You can see where those things are going on. Go to your favorite bookstore, buy the current revised edition, the new version of Getting Things Done. It's a manual, again, that I spent my life developing that methodology, and we weren't born doing it, but it's easy to do. As Jim said, there's some things that'll stick with you, forever. So go for it. And what else? I'm on Twitter. I'm dallen45, my birth year. No, that was Instagram. Sorry, Instagram dallen45. Twitter, I'm GTD Guy. So if you want to follow along, connect in with the network and what I do and what I say and what's going on, those are ways to do that.
Excellent. For the listener, I definitely will have links to all of his social media, books, website, etc. in the action plan, jimharshawjr.com/action. David, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on the show.
Jim, great, and thanks for your great work. I very much applaud you. I mean, you're right on with all that stuff. So very happy to support you and your network. So it was fun. It was fun.
This was a lot of fun. And for the listener, until next time, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.